Hello, and welcome to another special episode of the Play Up podcast. And as part of the podcast, I talk to notable people and fans in a section that I've called My Pompey Life. So this time I have someone who has watched over 1,000 live Pompey matches, but isn't actually a die-hard Pompey fan. I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Chief Sports Writer of the News, Neil Allen. Thanks for joining me, Neil. How are you?
Oh, Scott, no, very good. It's been a good few weeks, hasn't it, in terms of positive results, 3 wins in a row. Colby Bishop signed a new deal, and then tonight Terry Devlin signed a
Yeah,
new
I
deal as
saw that.
well. So, yeah, it's been an encouraging few weeks. But obviously, if Pompey lose on Saturday, people will be screaming for the manager to be sacked, and they're going down and all sorts. But
Well,
that's where we
that's
live in.
that's some of your world. I try and avoid a lot of that, but we'll talk about
Yeah.
Pompey's current fortunes probably near the end of the pod. I want to find out a bit more about your early career and your career watching Pompey. So, really delighted to have you on. Like I say, it's a bit unusual because you're not actually a Pompey fan. You observe. You kind of, you're an impartial observer most of the time, and it'd be interesting to get your perspective on things. So you've actually covered Pompey for 13 years now, and but before that, how did you get into journalism, and what sort of led you to that kind of career anyway?
I've covered Pompey on and off really for 24 years, I'd say.
Right?
Um, so yeah, I became chief sports writer in 2007, with the same about a week before my daughter was born. So on paternity leave, I ended up doing covering Pompey, and Pompey were banned at the time. We were banned at the time as well. Uh, Not a great time to start work, is it? Really, but
Not the only
we'll get.
time you've been banned, has it, Neil? I'm sure we'll
we'll,
cover a few
we'll
of those.
we'll get back to that. But yeah, basically, I started in the Midlands, went to university, had no idea what I wanted to do until towards the end. I was doing an English degree, and I thought I quite like I'll write a few things for the university magazine and see what happened there. And I quite liked that, and I took a year out and then did a journalism qualification, and then I spent 2 years in the Midlands working for weeklies doing news. But I always wanted to do sport. So because I wanted to do sport, I saw the job down on the Portsmouth News. Simon Parker was about to leave and join the Bradford paper. Simon Parker, and yeah, so I wanted to specialise in sport. I'd done sport on and off. I covered Bedwick United in one of the lower league, non-league seasons for 50 games. I remember they played Accrington in the FA Cup. I remember Accrington visited Bedworth. But so I covered 50 games that season, which is a great grounding, really. Yeah, and then I came down here, and my first duties were covering Southampton and Hampshire. But I dipped in and out of Pompey for a bit, and it gradually increased my workload on Pompey, which was great because you don't want to write about Southampton for the Portsmouth paper. There's no point. No
Yeah.
one reads it. What's the point?
But not many column inches there, really.
No, but I mean, the times have changed because the Southern Daily Echo also had a Pompey writer. That was Adam Leach. Adam Leach became their chief sports writer, and I became our chief sports writer. And funny enough, the David Norris game, I always call it, the obvious David Norris game at St Mary's, Adam was banned, and they wouldn't let me in the press box. So both of us ended up being in the stands with fans to cover the game. But yeah, back then, it's ridiculous to say now, but back then, the news has its designated Southampton reporter. And long before I was there, they'd have someone also covering Brighton as well. So it just shows you how times have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. A narrowing of scope of news, I guess.
Yeah.
So you didn't consider going anywhere else? The news, the Pompey news was the first one that you alighted on and went
No,
for it?
I had an interview at the Sunday Mercury in Birmingham, which was a Sunday paper. Um, didn't get any of there. Swindon, I had an interview at Swindon actually before Pompey, and they wanted me to do a sort of a week's work trial, and they also wanted me to cover Sunday League football. And considering I've been doing Saturdays covering games involving Villa, Wolves, West Brom, Birmingham, you'd alternate matches. I didn't really fancy doing Sunday League football, so I thought, nah. So I turned them down, and not long after, I managed to get the job at the News. So brilliant. I love cricket, I love football, so it was a great start for me covering both.
Well, as I guess as it turns out, and obviously I'm biased, and I suppose most people listening to this are biased as well. You've probably come to probably one of the best clubs, south of Manchester, I expect. So,
It's never dull, though, is it? It is never.
no,
And again, I suppose we'll come into this. I'll always remember one of the many times I went to the High Court in the Chiang Rai years. I remember sitting in the High Court, just looking around, and there was Pompey fans in there, Barry Chewing, Carl Padden was in there, and a few faces in there, Tony Goodall was in there, few faces. And I remember looking around the room thinking, I'm a sports reporter. Why am I back to covering court cases? I did court cases as a news reporter. Now I was there as a sports reporter. And I was just thinking, this is mad. I shouldn't be doing court cases. I'm meant to be the chief sports writer. Why am I here? But that summed up all our thoughts at the time. Everyone were football fans, dragged into the High Court to save their football club. Strange
Absolutely.
time, it really was. But my grounding in news side and covering court cases and things came in handy, really, because I've used those in covering Pompey. Crazy
Abs-
club.
Yeah, crazy years. We will cover those later on, definitely.
Yes, I know.
There's a lot of people who I want to hear your opinion of. But you said your first match you covered for Pompey was in February 2001, West Brom 2, Pompey nil, and you said it was
Mm.
Claridge's last game as Pompey manager, although he stayed on as a player for a while.
Yeah, it was
Um,
brutal.
Yeah. What do you remember of that? I mean, obviously, away match is probably difficult to go and get to cover as your first gig anyway. So, what do you remember of that weekend?
Oh, well, no, basically, I was doing a Steve Claridge watch was basically what I was there to do. So I was in the away end, uh, get views from fans about what they thought about the sacking of Steve Claridge, and then I had to watch him, how many touches he made, tackles, shots, that sort of thing. Keep a running tally on my notepad in among the fans. And that was the first time. And it was so brutal. I was chatting to Scott. Funny enough, Pompey had West Brom a few weeks ago, didn't they? And I was chatting to Guy Whittingham about this.
Hmm.
Because Guy was there that day as well as Claridge's assistant, and they had to give a team talk before the game, despite being sacked 2 days earlier, with the new manager Graham Ricks sat in the crowd. It was just mad. Poor Steve Claridge has to come off the bench after being absolutely distraught, quite rightly so, about being sacked suddenly as well as sacked, and he had to play football. And I remember at the time he was still contracted as a player, and I remember some fans giving him a bit of stick, saying, "Wow, if he's Pompey through and through, put that aside now, carry on playing." You can't do that to the man. You can't sack him as player manager, then expect him to carry on as a player. It doesn't work like that in life. Many of us many in jobs, if we were demoted and said, "What, you can still stay there and work," you don't want to, would you? It was brutal. It sums up Milan Mandrick really, absolutely brutal.
I was just
And
about
I
to say
late,
that.
yeah,
That sounds like I mean, I wouldn't say it was chaotic under Mandrick, but it was fairly rudderless at times. It felt like obviously, eventually he struck gold with Harry Redknapp, but it seemed like he kept throwing the dice, and Claridge's appointment was a gamble, wasn't it? Because obviously he was a
yeah.
contracted
But
player,
but
but
this was the era as well because so he sacked Claridge after 3.5 months in the job, and then said to Claridge, "By the way, you were never player manager, you were caretaker." And that's like, where's that come from? It's never been said before, ever. Claridge didn't know that. Mark Story been writing for months about player manager Steve Claridge. No one had ever raised issue with him. Suddenly, Milan Mandrick, oh, just a joke. You're a caretaker. And obviously, I've spoken to Steve about this in my second book, Played Upon Me 2, at length. Um, the poor guy, you feel so sorry for him because it was his dream to manage Pompey, and the sacking came completely out of the blue. Whether it's right or wrong is another story. It came out of the blue, and then to say to himself, "Nah, you're only caretaker anyway. Get back to playing." What? So he's going to go from a player in that dressing room to being a manager when he fell out with some players such as Kevin Harper, to then be expected to go back to being a player again, who'd been the boss of and fallen out with. Ain't going to work. And shortly
no.
after he left, so.
Yeah, well, like I say, it was no wonder we had 2 or 3 chaotic years under Milan until he found gold with Harry. So, I mean, after that, the next few years, I would say, were probably some of the most exciting at Pompey that we've
Mm.
been down here for decades. So, I mean, you moved here precisely the right moment, because obviously the next season was a Prosinecki season.
Yes.
As a prelude
And
during
Yosh.
Rick's season, and Yoshi, yeah, yeah. Well, less said about Yoshi, the better, really. But how he managed to play so many times for Japan, I've no idea. But yeah, so this probably your first full season was the Prosinecki season. So what are your memories of that?
Yeah, it was. I remember Prosnecki getting criticised at times for his work rate. Um, 20 years later, everyone loves him, and and no one mentions it. It's funny, isn't it? Really, so what time does? But clearly a wonderful player. But he was criticised for his work rate quite a lot. But yeah, fantastic to watch. And I remember, I remember one time our assistant deputy editor Mark Atchison, he said, right, he says, oh, I've been there long. He said, right, I've got something for you to do. Get some money out of petty cash, get a translator from Portsmouth University. I want you to go down to the training ground, grab Prosnecki after training, and give him a guided tour of Pompey, and we'll give you a photographer as well. So it's expected me to rock up, grab a player after training who didn't speak English with a translator. Forget going home. You come in with us. We're going on a tour around Pompey. Um, Mad when you think about it. So we turned up there. The translator exchanged a few pleasantries with Prosnecki, and Prosnecki said, "No, I'm off home," and that was it. I was just,
Well,
it was
I
just
wondered.
bizarre.
I wondered why I'd never seen that article. So it never
Yeah,
happened.
it was just bizarre. It's like it just doesn't make sense. Why would any you go rock up to a player and go, "Excuse me, can you come on a guided tour, please?" It's just no. But yeah, it's a crazy idea. And you have to go with it because you're young, and it's like somebody at the top tells you what to do. So you sort of go back. He wouldn't do it. It's a petty cashback. Yeah, okay. It was just crazy idea. But yeah, Prosnecki was a fascinating character. You see him smoking around the car park at Collingwood, especially. I remember being there. He made no secret of it, really. Sheffield Wednesday, my first game writing a Pompey match report. I always remember him stood outside the change room having a fag after the game. It was just absolutely bizarre. But he was clearly a wonderful talent, brilliant to watch. So many things about Pompey just make you smile, and that's one of them.
But it's
Yoshi as well. It makes me laugh when people still criticise a 0-0 at home to Mansfield, worst ever game I've seen. And I always remember Leighton Orient at home,
oh
the
god,
FA
yes.
Cup, the Yoshi game. That has to be the worst ever Pompey game I've seen. It was horrendous. Yoshi had a nightmare. Afterwards, the Japanese journalists were always there. And afterwards, he was in the tunnel giving an interview. Poor guy was in tears. Absolutely broken, he was. Um, it's just a
We had
terrible game. And I'll always remember when the game, when that era as well, which sums it up with like dream team, isn't it? When Graham Rix was told he would be sacked unless he played Yoshi instead of Dave Besson at Sheffield Wednesday.
is that
Just
true?
crazy. It's true. I spoke to
It's
Graham
true.
Rix the other day, actually, funny enough. Yeah, it's true.
Blimey.
I spoke to Fred Dinage the other day, actually, who was present when Milan made the phone call. Milan instructed, actually, Peter Storey to make the phone call to Graham Rix, telling him Yoshi's got to play, otherwise he'd get the sack. Crazy, crazy times.
Well, it was the 90s. I mean, it's that Lake Norton game you mentioned. It was also, I mean, if you remember, it was Hiley and Primus at the back, and both of them had an absolute shocker. Hiley was playing
Yeah.
centre back. So
What,
if you bear in mind,
wasn't there a Limboy back pass as well or something? Wasn't there?
yeah, there was a back pass that went. I think it was an own goal, or it went straight to a player, and that was their third or fourth, and it was an absolute disaster. But if you think about Linvoy's career after that, it's astonishing, really, isn't it? I mean, I don't think there was a Pompey fan in that crowd that would have wanted him to play for Pompey ever again.
No,
That's
and
how
there was
football is sometimes.
there was a free kick which Leno had scored from, and Yoshi hadn't moved because he didn't realise the referee had blown his whistle for it to be taken or something like that. But if you look back at that Pompey team, Quasi played,
Yep,
Gary O'Neill played,
yep,
Limboy played, Prosnecki played.
yeah. Wasn't a
So
bad
it
team,
wasn't
was
a
it?
bad team.
No, no, it's yeah, it was, but it was one of those freak games that I mean, I mean,
And
I remember football in the 90s, even, before you arrived. The last 3 or 4 years of the 90s, Pompey were shocking. We were fighting relegation every year. Stayed up a couple of times on the last day, and half the time, me and my friends would go to the Devonshire pub, and at 10 to 3, because it was pay on the day, at 10 to 3, we'd look at our watches and go, sod it, let's go and get another drink, because we couldn't face going to Fratton Park and watching what was on offer. So yeah, that was the late 90s. It wasn't good fare at all. So I mean, you've mentioned your play up Pompey books. You've now done 4, which is amazing, and you must have talked to such a wide range of players. What's that
yeah,
experience been like, talking to so many ex-pros and, as you say, managers and staff that have been at the club? What's the biggest sort of thing you've got throughout doing those 4 books?
I love doing them purely because I love sitting down with a former player, just me and him, no one else, just me and him, chatting honestly and openly about their time at Pompey. No press officer. I've not paid them any money. They've arranged to meet me because they want to do the book and do the interview. So they're not being told to by sponsors or the football club, or I have to do it like Jermaine Defoe did every interview, rolling his eyes. They want to be there. And I love it. Absolutely love it, because you just get just stories you get. And even those you sort of meet over the years who you've covered their eras, you get the truth about their eras, don't you? And what really happened, and it just lifts the lid on things, doesn't it? And I always, one of my ambitions. It sounds weird, but one of my ambitions was always to meet Benjani and ask him, was it true over the Harry Redknapp? I pushed him on a plane. It was genuinely one of my ambitions in life to get. And I've got Benji. I've got Benji for played at Pompey 3. And funny enough, I got him at Southampton Airport because he was about to catch a flight to go to um, testimonial for Vincent Company at Man City. I'll say about, it gave me a couple of hours to be fair. I ended up driving to the airport, which just it was a hotel just outside. And it was brilliant. Just finally get it. So what really happened, Benji? It's just great, because every transfer deadline day, Harry rolls out this story. And Benji said that his flight was delayed. He had to go to a different airport. Harry Redknapp was never at any of the airports anyway, let alone pushed him on a plane.
I thought he said he fell
Just
asleep, or was supposed to have fallen asleep and missed a flight or something.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't that. And the flights were delayed. The flights were cancelled at Southampton. So he had to go somewhere else. And it's just brilliant, finally getting the truth behind that story. And Benji finds it funny because he loves Redknapp so much. He doesn't mind the embellishment. He doesn't mind. He doesn't take any offence to embellishment whatsoever. But every time you sort of see the Redknapp do this story, and I think, I know the real truth, but it's Harry, isn't it? And Benji doesn't mind either. So don't get angry on his behalf. So yeah, just things like that. I just love finding out. I met Lee Brown the other day as well. Just talking. He's the first player I've interviewed um, on record of the Cowley years. Because this is what you get as well. The truth comes out when players retire, when they leave, isn't it? And it's just fascinating to find out what happened and things. And I met Carl Bennett last month as well. I went up to Telford to meet him, and it just makes you laugh. And like the team coach on away games sometimes used to drive past Fratton Park where the players were parked and drive to Warsash where Paul Cook lived, and they drive down this road and drop him off first,
Brilliant.
and then drive back all the way back to the ground to drop all the players off. It's just the little gems you pick up. John Durnan, they went around his house. So many great stories. It's an absolute delight. I just love doing it, and hopefully the fans enjoy reading them, because the players are honest, they're open. The thing that's come out in the recent book was Kenny Jackett's treatment of Pittman and Gareth Evans, where he sat them both as captain and vice captain, then instructed everyone from the football club gathered in the centre circle at the training ground. Everybody, all the office staff, all the community staff, all the academy staff, Barry, Big Kev, everyone there in a circle. Jackett made Pittman and Evans stand in the middle of the circle, and Jackett said to everyone, just to say, he's no longer your captain, he's no longer your vice captain. That's terrible, isn't it? Talk about trying to humiliate two senior pros. Absolutely terrible. And
So
yeah,
why did that come about?
absolutely.
Why did he do that? Because I was going to say, I watched your interview on the Portsmouth Football Club website. You did, John, you more 4 years ago, and you speak really well about the club. But Kenny Jackett was one person that you mentioned was an absolute gentleman. So that doesn't sound
Oh,
like an
completely.
absolute gentleman to me.
No, no. He'd fallen out with them, hadn't he? It was a brutal thing to do. You can't talk about. He was trying to humiliate two senior pros, and it didn't work. They were sort of shrugging to each other, going, and they had each other basically. So
Yeah.
that it wasn't one person on his own. So they could laugh about it together. But he's lost them, and some of the players found it very difficult after that. But he was a decent guy, Jacket. But yeah, I totally agree. It wasn't a great thing to do.
Was that
But
the beginning of the end then, do you think?
for him, because this was about, they just played Blackpool, hadn't they? So that was about the August time, and he left later in the season, didn't he? After the
Mm,
Salford final debacle, didn't he?
yeah.
So he kept getting results out of Pompey, didn't he? When he was tottering on the edge, like winning 8 games in a row and things like that, which is remarkable. It didn't quite happen for him, did it? Which shows you what a feat John Messina has done to take Pompey up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, no, we will go on to current situation in a bit. But so I mean, you mentioned a few favourite players as well. You've talked to the likes of Lasana Diarra, Sylvain Distin, Nico Cranshaw, and Paul Merson. Obviously, I'm sure you could get a whole book out of Paul. But so I mean, what? Yeah, is there anything that you can tell us that they weren't allowed to publish about any of the players? Is there anything that you had
Not
to
re-
cut from the books?
Not really. No. You say I talked to Diarra. Diarra's my favourite Pompey player. He never did any interviews.
No, is that because he only
No,
spoke
no.
French?
Yeah, he's a sulky character. Though. He wasn't that popular in the squad. He was a strange character, but what a player! But no, no, not really. I do remember a time where I've had a few like falling out with press officers in the past, and I remember one time the manager. There was a press conference. I think it was Harry Redknapp. Yeah, it was Harry Redknapp. He did a press conference, and after there was going to be a community, an Oakley community event with kids there at the training ground. This is at Wellington Sports Ground, and Sol Campbell was going to be do a piece of the kids, coach them or something like that. So I hung on after the press conference with Harry Redknapp. Half an hour gone, Sol Campbell hadn't turned up. He was getting a massage. An hour's gone. He hasn't turned up. Still getting a massage. An hour and a half gone. Still hasn't turned up. And I just said, no, I'm going now. Walked out. I was like, I'm not waiting around. Walked out. So I went back to the office. Press officer Helen Wood rang me up, angrily rang me up. How dare you leave? How dare you leave? Sol would have been there soon. And I'm like, sorry, wait a minute. I waited 1 hour and a half. There were kids there, and you're moaning at me. And she says, "Oh, it's a bit unprofessional. You should have stayed for him." No, 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 no. Who's been unprofessional? 1 hour and a half late, or me? Anyway, so we had a debate on the phone. And then after we finished, I sent Oki an email saying, just to point out that there won't be any coverage in the news of Sol Campbell's stint with the kids today because he was 1 hour and a half late and we couldn't spare any more time. Sorry about that. And they came back to me and said, oh, thanks for letting us know. Because I thought, right, I'm going to put the club in it now. It's not my fault, dear me. But this is how it was that era. They pandered after every player. I went to a few school events where people like Glenn Johnson was meant to meet kids, and well, one was in the Victory Lounge. He never turned up. But in those days,
Shocking,
they'd
isn't
get
it?
away with it. They'd never
Yeah.
turned up, and they'd get away with it. These players, they really would. I think a lot more Sol Campbell than Glenn Johnson, to be honest. But yeah, it's just you get those sort of things, but don't they don't appear in the press. But when players, I love the fact when Pompey left the Premier League, players became more humble naturally, dropping down the divisions. They develop a greater affiliation with a football club.
Yes.
Um, and I'm sure you attended the Boys Off dinner and the Hall of Fame dinner and things like that, where you get whole teams turn up from the past, don't they? And I remember if they ever tried that with a 2008 Cup final team, you barely get any of them. So
No.
you get. Nico loves Pompey. I've interviewed him in his book. What a great guy. Nico Cranshaw gave me an hour and a half on the phone talking Pompey. Favorite time of his career. Brilliant. That's what you love. Sol Campbell I had 3 hours with him, and he bought me a pizza. And Herman he turned up, but there's others I don't think quite get. JMO's a good guy as well. There's others I don't think. Distan, I've had spoken to him. What a great guy. Others don't quite get Pompey. You'll never see Mentari back or Kanu, would you?
No.
Or Diarra, which is a shame. But they get as we've seen in recent years in the Paul Cook side, the John Messina side, they've got that rapport with the fans, haven't they? And it's good to say. I love that.
Yeah, well, it's a different club now, isn't it? I mean, despite all of our troubles, it's been moulded back into a community club and a club that actually, has a great relationship with its fans.
Mm.
It's not, perhaps that's the only good thing that we had from those troubled times is that we managed to remake the club in the fans' image in a certain degree. So, and also in the city's image, because I don't think the club in the Premiership years represented the city at all, really.
I,
So,
I remember. I remember there was. I mean, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the lad, but a young lad passed away, and there was an event at Stratton Park where I think they let off balloons there, and you had people like Jed Wallace and Ricky Holmes and Simon Ferry all turned up to be part of that. I thought that was brilliant. They didn't have to be there, but they wanted to be there. I just thought that's class, and you see that a lot of the times, really, when something happens to a fan, and you see people like Josh Murphy donating to fundraising and things like that. And Marlon Pat did it as well. I think that's brilliant. And then you never had that. And the Premier League were the glorious years. They were golden years. They were brilliant, weren't they? As you know, they were a wonderful time in the Premier League. But players just passed through. Glenn Johnson, no interest. I'll try getting a few books. No interest. He's told me
No,
he's too busy. He's retired doing nothing. He's playing golf, but he's too busy. They just got no interest. So
he's not got a
it's a
Saturday job
shame.
in B&Q then.
No, he did do Sky Sports and Talk Sport, but they quietly released him because he wasn't that good. He was never a good talker anyway, was he?
No,
But
no.
yeah, and so I think people like Colby Bishop, he's real, isn't he? You meet Colby Bishop, his route into the game, his love for the club is natural and genuine. It's real, I like that. I like the fact they live in the local area.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah, my friend Phil is absolutely delighted that both him and Marlon live down the road from him, and especially their kids are. They wander past, and occasionally they're bumping into a footballer on the way to school, which is awesome, really.
yeah. Marlon walks to training sometimes. I've seen him.
Yeah, yeah,
Terry Devlin is in Cosham and things like that. They live in the local area, and I just love that because before they didn't live in the area. They had no interest in the area, no affiliation with the community, the football club. But they were great times on the pitch, weren't they?
absolutely. I mean, I'll go back to this interview that I watched with Johnny Moore you did 4 years ago, and I said, you speak so well about the club, and obviously you've got a real attachment to the area and the club now, despite being from the Midlands yourself. And one thing that struck me was obviously it wasn't that long after the Cheltenham game, but you really welled up when you mentioned that Cheltenham game
Yeah.
and what it meant after all the troubles. So it's really interesting to see someone like yourself who doesn't really have to have an attachment. It's a job. You obviously work hard and travel long hours and all the rest of it, but you seem to have really grown to love the club over the years.
Yeah, I remember one time I was reading some criticism of me. Some guy was saying, "I love it when Pompey lose," and I always write longer match reports when Pompey lose. And you think some people are a bit dim, aren't they? The match reports are always 1,000 words in the paper. These days are about 800 words. So how do you get out that I write longer match reports when Pompey lose? But
Yeah,
but, any, but anyway, the other thing is, it's no fun covering Pompey when they lose. It's no fun covering Pompey when they go 23 games without a win under Guy Whittingham.
yeah,
That's not fun. That's not enjoyable. The best moments of Pompey. It's no fun reminiscing over Leighton Orient. Oh, glory days, Leighton Orient, FA Cup. No, the glory days, the thing that you love is when Pompey do well. When you see Cheltenham, still my favourite game. When you see winning the FA Cup. When you see Pompey beat Spurs 2-0. When you see the David Norris game. When you see Connor Shotnessy get the last minute winner to win the league, they're wonderful games, aren't they? That's what you're there for. And it's just an absolute myth saying, oh, he revels in it when Pompey doing badly. Sorry, what? I read somebody had a pop at me in the summer when I did a match report about losing to Wickham. It's like, oh, he loves it when they lose. Well, it's a match report. It's not my fault they lost. The real Crew when they ended that run without 23 games without a win. Crew was a wonderful day. Players were crying. It was a wonderful day, and that sticks with you. Not defeat, not losing to Newport when Joe DeVere had a nightmare and scored an own goal and things like that. You want to be there to see Pompey win things. Check a trade trophy final.
yep,
Jamal Lowe. Wow. They're the best, and it's just and that's what as a football fan, that's what you want to report on. You want to report on those glorious moments. And I'll go back to the Cheltenham game because again, and you were part of the journey. You were there. I mean, the High Court. I don't think you were there at the High Court, were you that day?
I was doing interviews back at Fratton Park that day.
Okay, yeah.
So
Well,
I
the,
was
the High
I was the first one in the pub. Pretty much, it was me, Guy, and Andrew Moon went straight to the pub.
Well, you were part of that journey, so very closely part of that journey, as was I as a spectator. And we saw what happened. We saw how close the club came to being liquidated. We lived that journey. So when Pompey won the League Two title after occupying the top of the table for the last 32 minutes of the season, it was suddenly you've gone 3 relegations in 4 years. You've followed the demise. You've been to High Court. You've lived this whole journey, this depressing plummet down the leagues where people are laughing at you, where Talk Sports are saying, what's the point? Is it worth saving Pompey and running a poll on it? We've seen those years. We've seen the charlatans come through. We've seen people kowtowing to Chamrai because they want to be seen in the know and throwing their principles and morals out the window. We've seen Chamrai try to sue me over a final match report that he didn't like in 2010. We've lived that. Suddenly, Cheltenham, 6-1, Cheltenham. It's not the FA Cup. I know that. It's not a Wembley win. I know that. It's not beating Spurs and Harry Redknapp and Peter Crouch and Nico Cranshaw at Wembley. I know that. But Cheltenham, that was the start of the rise. We've been on that journey, and that was the beginning. That was the next step. And if you've been it, I'm speaking to the ideal person because you know exactly what I'm talking about here. People had the front row seat on that roller coaster, which was kept going down and down and down with no ups. Suddenly, we had a damn up, didn't we? Suddenly.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing moment. And my good mate Dave Bowers in the press box as well, working for Express at the time.
Hello,
And we
Bunky. I know
embraced.
he listens. You all right, mate?
Oh, does he? Oh, damn! I don't like him really. And at the final whistle, we embraced because it really was an emotional moment for both of us. I'm not a Pompey fan, but it gets to you, doesn't it?
He does.
And but I've lived the journey. I want the good guys to win. The good guys beat the bad guys in court. Chamrai, bye bye. All his minions, all his sidekicks gone. Bye bye. But the good guys won that day, and it was just start of the climb. And it was the final note in Trust history as well. It was perfection, absolute perfection. Mark Trapani cries his eyes out in the stand. Perfection. I just love that day. It's still my favourite day coming. All the 1,002 games covering Pompey. That's my favourite, not the cup final.
Well, yes. I mean,
Theologists.
having been there at the top of the Fratton end, yeah, it was an astonishing day. And as you say, it was kind of a full stop on a horrible kind of 7 or 8 years, really. So, I mean, one of the notes I made is like the admin days, 2009, 2013, so 2013. So we've, I mean, that's the 4 years that Pompey seemed to be bouncing around like a rubber ball between disaster and crisis. So we've got a rogues gallery here. So I don't know how much. Obviously, I think you could say an awful lot more in Chanrai than you can on Gatormack. But I'm going to give you each name, and you can give us maybe a little bit of insight or a quick story on each one. So let's start with Gatormack.
Never met him really. He was just cold. I met him the first time he came to the football club. First time when he was introduced, there was a big press conference. And one of the nationals actually said to him, "We understand this is your dad's money and not yours," and he denied it. And this is fair play. And they did an interview there. Then he did sort of these one-on-ones as well. And he kept banging on about Arthur Conan Doyle used to play for this football club verbatim, as if he revised it in Wikipedia on the way to the ground. And it was just like, okay. He never wanted to do interviews. He never wanted to communicate. Um, it wasn't the right fit. And obviously, my opinions clouded a bit or influenced a bit by people who did have meetings with him where he showed no interest. He ripped up the boardroom, didn't he, and sterilised it and threw out perfectly good furniture and the skip. And I went through about 9 years, I think it was, of not speaking to a Pompey owner or a chairman. And Guy about was one of them. And I remember I used to mention it sometimes, and fans would have a go at me. Oh, who cares? I don't care if he speaks. He's doing a good job. No, you should care. You want them to speak. If they're not speaking, be a bit suspicious.
Well, you mentioned him ripping out the club's history. So the trust, I think it was in 2010, got a room to use down at the down where the gym is now, opposite the study centre and the shop.
Yeah.
There was a room there, and we moved into the room, and there was like these ornate cabinets at the back, which had obviously been moved from the boardroom, or certainly somewhere important at Fratton Park. Opened it up, and there was catalogues of programmes, and there was handwritten match reports and lists of players and how much the gate receipts were from 1920s to 1940s.
Wow.
It was all just dumped in this room. Couldn't believe it. So we got on the phone to people like Jake Payne and said, right, History Society, we need all this stuff rescuing. Can you come and get it? So it was an astonishing period. So let's go on to everyone's favourite, Al Fahim. I know you've got a couple of stories about him.
He was just a joke, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I remember he turned up and started kicking the ball around with a lad in the car park. It was brilliant PR because people think, oh, he's a great guy, yeah, a great guy, Al Fahim. I never spoke to him. I never spoke to him. There was a nonsense of turning up to the games in a Pompey shirt and then requesting they stop the game so he could stand up and wave to the fans in the middle of a game.
yeah,
He wanted them
yeah,
to stop the game. Another occasion, he wanted them to stop the game so he could cross the pitch or something like that. The famous one, he turned up in the boardroom eating a mixed monster burger. The guy was just an absolute joker. And the famous one, I wasn't there, but when he went to meet the fans that time, I don't know if you were there, that he went to meet the fans and they tore him, they tore him to shreds over his fantasy £50 million investment he was going to put into the club. And Story knew that he was with a blagger and they didn't want him to go because they knew he exposed and just a pure fantasist. Then a couple of years later, he popped up saying he wanted to buy Pompey again,
yeah,
on Twitter. And it's just like, and I remember he never he meant to put a bid in and he didn't. And I remember Michael Hall destroyed him by calling it a heroic attempt to open a bank account, and it was just mad. It was just, I mean, he actually did put 5 million into the football club, so he did put some money in. So you can give him that, can't you? But that's all really because some of them never put anything, did they?
Well,
So
whose money was it? That's the good question. I don't think any
well,
of
he
it
was
was
late. He was later
to
put in.
his.
He was later put in prison, wasn't he? Because it was his wife's money.
Yeah, apparently.
Uh,
Yeah. Where did his
yes.
wife get it? Well, that's but we all know how twisted web that is, and how there's a million threads there. Ali Al Faraj, of course, no one's ever met him. No one's. I looked on the internet again today. There are a couple of entries, but out of the three entries, two of them mention that he was the supposed owner of Portsmouth Football Club for a few months, 3.5 months, I think it is, and in an interview with his brother, in inverted commas, who said, "Oh yeah, he definitely exists, and he definitely owned the football club for a while." So that was a. I mean, what do you say? It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Well,
If we
this is the
thought,
thing. I interviewed him. I was interviewing his brother in London, and Al Fahim rang him up. I saw it flash up on the phone. And he had a conversation with Al Fahim in front of me. Unless it's someone posing as Al Fahim, I don't know. And then when he finished the phone call, I said, "Is there any chance of speaking to him sometime? I'll arrange it." Never did. So that's the closest. That's the closest I ever came to meeting Al Fahim through his brother being on the phone.
yeah,
But no one at the football club met him. No one at the FA met him. He faxed across his passport, picture of his passport.
no, absolutely. And there's that one photograph of him in the headscarf, and that's the only thing you can find on the internet. That one photograph of him in the headscarf, ridiculous, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, the wee tinted thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
And then everyone's favourite, Bauram Chanrai,
Yeah.
who just kept coming back and back and back and back, one way or another, to try and fleece the football club, and he nearly killed it, didn't he? Very, very nearly. What we talked about that court day. I wasn't there. I know quite a few people were. Give the people who are listening to this a flavour of that day and just how close we were to losing our football club.
It summed up everything about Pompey at the time because not all fans were behind the trust,
No, no. Well,
as you well
I'm
know.
well aware of that.
And I remember there were very. I remember at one of the intervals there. I say interval. They stopped at one point. It was adjourned slightly, for other things to happen. I remember me and a few of the fans went to a pub nearby called the Old Cock Inn, and I tweeted a picture of the fans in there. We're at the Old Cock Inn, and there were people abusing us on Twitter. That sums you lot up. That suits you all because you're cocks and things like that. Like, what? It's just bizarre. We're still getting abuse. The trusts are fake, and on that day, and then I remember there was an adjournment later on, and we're waiting outside. I might be in the same bit. We're waiting outside, and somebody comes up who it was I thought it was Tom Atkins actually. Tom Atkins, great lad, works for Express. Great lad, Tom Atkins, and he turned up and he goes, "Oh, I've been told it's been adjourned for the day, and that's it for the proceedings." I was like, "No, we've been here. It's not been adjourned for the day. They're about to go back in actually for the verdict. Where have you heard that?" And when he told me, I thought, "Here we go again. Yeah, somebody spreading lies and gossip yet again. It's from the usual tweeting birds again. And it's just like, even today of all days, people are spreading incorrect propaganda. People are abusing the trust. People are abusing me as a journalist because I wanted the trust to be Chanrai. It was weird. And then suddenly we go in court. I remember going to the lift with Trevor Birch. Trevor Birch, tremendous guy, by the way.
Yep.
I remember going to the lift with Trevor Birch upstairs. And I went, well, and he goes, I can't say anything. And he just looked at me and there was a bit of twinkle in his eye. You're thinking, oh, okay. And then, of course, we got into the court and the puppy had been saved. That was incredibly emotional. There were fans crying, people hugging each other, Ian McInnes hugging everyone, bear hugging everyone in the room. Michael Hall had to go out and compose himself into a different room. It was such an emotional occasion. It really, really was. And I had a text from somebody. I'm not going to name who. I had a text from somebody. That's the club finished. Then it's just bizarre. And there will be people, and there are people to this day who would never admit Pompey would have been liquidated, and who would never admit the trust was the only people that could have saved the football club, despite it being said in court. Despite the FA Premier League. No, it's conspiracies are everywhere, aren't they? And that's another one that will never die. People would never want to admit they're wrong, and that was another occasion because I'm afraid they were wrong. Chanrai tried to destroy the football club, and he didn't succeed.
No.
Pompey
Well,
live, and
lu-
that's because of the fans.
absolutely. Luckily, we had more than 1,200 people who didn't care about what was being said on Twitter and actually put their hand in the pocket and stumped up the money that we needed.
They were great. They were great times as well in a strange way because it united everyone. It was a lovely spirit, wasn't it? It just, you made friends, it united people, it brought the community together, good people in the community. Some people couldn't fund it, but they were behind it. You had people putting shares in groups, didn't they? And not everyone can afford £1,000. Us at the news, we bought a share ourselves, each putting £100 each, and things like that. And uh, everyone got together, syndicates. Everyone did their part, and it was a good time as well, wasn't it? Because it was just lovely. Because I don't know, it's hard to describe because it was such a horrible backdrop that the club could be liquidated. But it just showed you what remarkable fans are because that had never been achieved at that time, a club of that stature being saved by the fans, and it will never be achieved again. Absolutely remarkable. And I've got so much respect for those people involved at the forefront of it. Ashley Brown, Tom Deary, Mick Williams, Mark Trapani, Michael Hall, so many people. And it affected so many people's personal lives as well because they devoted and dedicated so much to their cause. So much. They gave everything. And you've still got people chirping away, having a go at them on Twitter and things like that, who support Chamroy. And, it's, yeah,
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 it was
that's how it
for
was.
3 minutes. For me, for 3 years, it was pretty much a full-time job that I, without, I'm not overdressing that at all. I was working 7 days a week, doing, talking to people and trying to deal because if you turn our minds back to 2010, 2011, and 2012, it was every other week something had happened. There wasn't a bill paid. They couldn't pay the players. The High Court would come in and we'd get it was almost a weekly, daily thing that something would happen.
Even the SOS Pompey lot as well, brilliant.
Yes, yeah,
Bob
absolutely,
Beach,
yeah.
Carl Padden. There's so many I should mention as well. I've
The
got
bad cops.
other
We
people.
needed the
Yeah,
bad
yeah,
cops,
yeah.
didn't we?
And one of my favourite moments, and I mentioned this in my article the other week, there was a character on Twitter who was threatened to break my legs in a charity match to raise money for the trust. And he was claimed he had two shares in the club, in the trust, but it was just a lie. He was a fantasist. And anyway, he threatened to break my legs, and it didn't bother me the slightest because when I played, I was a bit of a tough tackler. So, bring it on. It just wouldn't bother me in the slightest. And it was a fun charity event. Ray Crawford played for Express FM. It was a fun charity event. Yet this idiot was on about turning up to break my legs. And I will never forget, he never turned up, of course.
No, of
That's
course.
how it was, a fantasist. But I didn't realise until later in the event that a group of Pompey fans led by Cal Metcalf had turned up to back me up and also have a little word with him. And I was so touched by that because, again, it's with people coming together to help each other. And they had my back there. And I thought that was really special for me because, if this guy was going to go for me, you wouldn't mess with some of them people he had involved. I'm also told that Carl Padham sent him a little text as well, warning you.
Yeah, you don't want to
You
mess
wouldn't
with
mess with
Carl.
that. Well, exactly. It's just things like that. It's just a nice thing to do, and we're all on the same side. I just think it was a remarkable time, and thankfully, it ended up on a positive note.
Absolutely. I bet you couldn't have imagined when you were at that West Brom game what you were letting yourself in for, really, would you?
No.
Over the years. You know,
Yeah.
you had to be a high court expert as well as an expert on sport. Let's end up with some more positive stuff. So I asked you who was your favourite manager, and you put Harry Redknapp. We won't mention
Mm.
We won't talk about Paul Hart because
I've talked about it enough.
he clearly
Yeah.
wasn't a very nice man. But Harry, he arguably has been our best manager for the last 30, 40 years, or if not longer. Give us some insight into him and what his experience was being in and around him on an almost daily basis.
It was great. Answer the phone to you, and I mean, you're influenced because it was such a great time of football. The two spells he had with Pompey were remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And I agree, Pompey's best manager for 70 odd years,
Yeah,
best manager, certainly the most successful, comfortably. The football at times, how he was, he could blow his top, but he'd forget it the next day. He'd give you rollickins, and you deserved it sometimes. It was just brilliant to deal with Harry. He's just a real character. Again, through doing these books, the last book I did, Harry did the forward for it. So I met Harry for 3 hours in Sandbanks over 2 days. Brilliant. And this is a thing. You sit down with Harry Redknapp and you think to yourself, I might not have this chance again. So this could be the last chance. 3 hours with Harry Redknapp. He wants to be there. He's not being paid. Me and him sat in Rick Steen's restaurant, by the way. And I hate fish, but we weren't eating. We sat there, it was like a breakfast. Sat there, and it's just what a pleasure that is. 3 hours with Harry Redknapp, reflecting on the old stories. So, Harry, what really happened when the Pedro Mendes game? Were you going to get the sack? Yeah, it was. Yeah, they lined up John Gregory, and you think, what? Really? This is what you learn. This is what I love. You learn these little stories. And he just gave me his time, and yeah, just fantastic. Um, Great guy, and I can understand why people never took to him again after leaving Southampton, which was a shocking, dreadful decision.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, they were great time, great manager.
Yeah, I think that was his emotion again, wasn't it? He made quite a few decisions emotionally, and I think once things weren't going well for him at Pompey, I think he could see that Gatormat was getting into trouble. I think he could see that the money was going to quickly drain out of the club,
Yeah.
and I don't think he wanted to be any part of that because he realised that he wouldn't be able to cope with that with handling a team that was losing all its stars. So
His stock was high, and I don't blame him going to Spurs
no.
whatsoever. Um, but also he genuinely regrets going to Southampton.
Mm.
Quite right, but he does regret it, and he genuinely considers Pompey the best time of his football career as a manager.
Yeah, well, that's nice to hear. Well, thank you, Neil. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I may get you back in again because I'm sure there's a lot more we can cover. I think.
That's about 10 years off it, haven't we?
Well,
So,
absolutely. But I mean, listen, talked about your baiting on social media, and you really need to put your phone down of an evening and not worry about people calling you names on X anymore, because I know for a fact that you are definitely well appreciated amongst most Pompey fans, and 1,000 games is an absolutely amazing achievement. So
thank you.
long may you continue, and let's hope you get to another 1,000, and maybe we'll see Pompey in the Premiership again once more.
Yeah, well, maybe, but you don't want it to be like how Southampton have fared in the Premier League, do you?
No, absolutely not. No. Anyway, listen, thank you very much, Neil. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. This has been the Play Up Podcast. It's My Pompey Life with Neil Allen. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.